touch the darkness once more.
Well, we ain't got time for an introduction. There's a lot to talk about, including some Balrog-sized spoilers, so let's just go right ahead and dive into the ending of Rings of Power Season 1 Explained. Let's start off with the very beginning of the episode and the twist that the stranger is in fact Lord Sauron. After a season of pursuing him, the White Cloaks and Middle-earth's knockoff version of Slim Shady, who also reveal themselves to be skin changers, finally find their man and tell him that they are there to serve him, as he is indeed Middle-earth's biggest gangster. Oh, sorry Morgoth, second biggest gangster, Sauron. But more on that later. Elsewhere, Galadriel takes Halbrand to see Elrond and the rest of the elves to try to save him, before Halbrand fanboys over Celebrimbor and the two discuss the magical properties of ore. Galadriel, Elrond, and Celebrimbor discuss crafting a new kind of power in one circular trinket. Wonder where this is going. And give it to the High King, but he refuses out of hand and orders them to scrap the project entirely until he is convinced by Elrond, but changes his mind because, you know, we need the story to happen. Celebrimbor and Halbrand begin to craft a ring of power, but Galadriel starts to finally grow somewhat suspicious of the mysterious man she met on a raft in the middle of the ocean, and questions not only Halbrand's intentions, but his lineage as well. Meanwhile, the White Cloaks let the stranger know that those who cast him down set a veil on his mind to inhibit his powers and make him forget who he is, as well as revealing that the star constellations they both seek is the Hermit's Hat, which is invisible in all but one place, the Far East. However, the stranger's powers are still somewhat out of control and the White Cloaks have to subdue him. As the Harfoots try to rescue who they presume to be the stranger, but is actually that pesky Slim Shady again, one of the White Cloaks ends up throwing a knife and stabbing and eventually killing Lenny Henry, which is blasphemy as far as I'm concerned. To protect his friends, the stranger gets into a massive magic battle with the White Cloaks until he is knocked out. The Harfoots help the stranger fight back and utilize his powers, and they soon realize after all that he's not Sauron, but he's instead the other one.
I'm good.
Speaking of, elsewhere Halbrand and Celebrimbor realize that they cannot force the Mithril to bond with the other ones. They must coax it to do so, and also, instead of crafting it into a crown, they decide to craft it into a much smaller item. Again, wonder where this is going. However, Galadriel just has no time for idle chit-chat and confronts Halbrand on his real identity, saying that the last man to wear his crest died over 1,000 years ago, and that man had no heir, meaning Halbrand isn't the king of the Southlands like he says he is. And that is when he is all revealed to be none other than Sauron. For real this time. Sauron sends Galadriel into a waking dream as she remembers her brother in Valinor. But although she knows Sauron has entered her mind, she struggles with the delusion. Sauron reveals that he felt freed after the death of Morgoth, and reveals how he manipulated Galadriel to accomplish everything that he has, before trying to convince Galadriel to join him so they could rule the galaxy. Sorry, wrong franchise, to rule Middle-earth together as Queen and not-so-dark Lord. Galadriel rejects his proposition, unsurprisingly, and the two have a screaming match with weird camera angles, until Galadriel begins to drown in the real world and the dream until she awakes to find Sauron missing. With Sauron now gone, Galadriel decides that 3 rings must be forged for the elves alone in order to fight Sauron, but she is told by Celebrimbor that they will need the purest gold and silver from Valinor to complete the forging of the ring, meaning she has to surrender her daggers. Meanwhile, in now perfect English, the stranger reveals that he is a wizard, wonder which one, and tells the Harfoots that he will be heading on his merry way, along with Nori there and back again on an adventure. But before he does, he says the line,
When in doubt, always follow your nose.
Which is a play off of the line, if in doubt, Meriadoc, always follow your nose. Said in Fellowship of the Ring by, you guessed it, Gandalf. Now, Tolkien purists will say that Gandalf wasn't around in the Second Age, and that would be right. And although it is heavily implied that he is Gandalf, despite Amazon not having the rights to the character, he could very well be another member of Gandalf's Wizard Order. But for now, we'll kinda just assume that he's the big gray guy. And finally, Elrond, Celebrimbor, and Galadriel craft the 3 rings of power for the elves, meaning that we close out the first season of Rings of Power with some actual rings of power. Although again, as Tolkien purists will know, the elvish rings were actually the last ones to be forged before Sauron crafted the One Ring. But Amazon seems to have no qualms in diverging here or there in small ways. But of course, there are still more rings to be made, one of which will rule all. Oh, speaking of objects, I forgot to mention what happens on Numenor, and the moment when something that looked like a Palantir was found, which could set up some major plot points for the story to come. So what can we expect from Season 2? Well, we know that Sauron will still have his beady eye on the human kingdom of Numenor, and with a potential Palantir, he could commune and corrupt from afar. Or, as a shapeshifter, he could return in disguise to cause mayhem and bring about its fall. And of course, seeing as this show is the Rings of Power, we can expect to see some newly forged rings soon. We will also likely see more of Sauron's manipulation as he tries to corrupt the ring bearers. And we may even see the formation of the infamous Nazgul, and in particular, the Witch King of Angmar. Oh, and my guess is that we will likely see dwarves having a run-in with a Balrog after that tease in episode 7. But let us know what you both want and expect to see in Season 2 of Rings of Power, other than more Lenny Henry, because that ship has sadly sailed. Finally though, while we cannot be certain of when, we can be very much certain that all-out war will be coming soon, along with the unification of men and elves as they battle to defeat Sauron, which we all know how that goes.